Imagine yourself standing in the streets of Jerusalem right now. A crowd wrapped in white cloths is walking toward you. They look like pale, shadowy figures. You stare at them intently, and in that moment, you feel as if your heart is going to stop. Because among those approaching is the father you buried. Beside him, you recognize your devout neighbor who died years ago. This cannot be a nightmare. This is not a scene from a movie. After Jesus took his last breath on the cross, dozens of the dead emerged from the tombs in Jerusalem. Men and women who had lain beneath the earth for years, decades, even centuries, stepped out of their graves and walked upon the soil of Jerusalem. People saw them. Entire families recognized their deceased relatives, one by one. The Gospel of Matthew, chapter 27, verses 52 and 53, recounts this without any embellishment, almost as if it were a mundane historical fact. And strangely, most Christians and historians reading this passage fail to notice three details that change everything. First, the exact moment those saints stepped out of the tomb. Second, the original Greek word Matthew chose to describe them, a word rendered invisible in modern translations. Third, why only Matthew felt the need to record this, while the other three gospel writers, Mark, Luke, and John, bypassed the event entirely. By the time you reach the end of this video, you will have learned the most powerful yet most forgotten proof in the Bible. I'm not asking you to subscribe to the channel right now. Just wait and listen. If, when the video ends, you feel that this information has given you an entirely new perspective, you can calmly make your decision then. If you are ready, let's begin. It is Friday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. A deep darkness has fallen over Jerusalem for 3 hours. In that profound silence following the last cry of Jesus, everything begins to tremble. An earthquake strikes, rocks split open, and in the hills outside the city, in those limestone caves where the Jews buried their dead, something no one expected happens. The tombs open by themselves. Matthew writes in verse 52 with surgical precision, "The tombs broke open, and the bodies of many holy people who had fallen asleep were raised to life." But in verse 53, there is a detail that turns everything upside down. Matthew says those dead did not come out of their tombs on Friday. They came out after Jesus' resurrection, not on Friday, not on Saturday, but exactly 3 days later on Sunday. Do you know what this means? It's a chilling detail. Those bodies from Friday to Sunday waited in wide open tombs, completely motionless on that thin line between life and death. What were they waiting for? To solve this mystery, we must look at the original word Matthew used, Hagioi. Modern translations call them saints or good people. But in first century Greek, Hagioi was a technical term. It meant set apart for God, consecrated. By choosing this exact word, Matthew was giving a tremendous theological nod to his Jewish readers. He was telling them that the consecrated righteous, prophesied by Daniel centuries ago, the ones who would inherit the kingdom, were finally waking up. So why didn't they leap out the moment the tombs opened on Friday? The answer is hidden in Paul's letter to the Corinthians. Christ has been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. First fruits. In Jewish culture, the rest of the harvest could not be touched until the very first crop was offered to God. If those dead had stepped out of the tomb on Friday before Jesus, Christ could not be the first. The entire theology of the resurrection would collapse. That is why they had to wait. On Sunday, the general crossed the border and his army followed. But who were these resurrected people? Abraham, Moses, King David? Matthew doesn't give names, but the verse states that they entered the holy city and appeared to many. If the people stepping out of those tombs were Abraham or Moses, who had died 2,000 years earlier, no one on the street would have recognized them. They had no pictures, no portraits. Their appearance would have been meaningless. According to the early church fathers and conservative historians, these resurrected individuals were righteous people who had died recently, faces still vividly alive in the community's memory. Perhaps it was the elderly Simeon who held the infant Jesus in the temple. Perhaps it was Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist. Or perhaps it was Joseph himself, the carpenter father of Jesus. People saw them and froze in shock, whispering, That's our neighbor who died 10 years ago. That's the devout rabbi. So why didn't Luke, Mark, or John write about this? Because Mark was writing for the Romans, an audience focused on action and power. They wouldn't understand the prophet Daniel. Luke was writing for intellectual Greeks seeking hard evidence. And because he couldn't reach those eyewitnesses directly years later, his elite historical approach kept it out of his gospel. John, on the other hand, was completely focused on theological symbolism. Only Matthew was writing to the Jews, and only the Jews could truly grasp how this miracle connected to their sacred texts. Matthew doesn't say these people died. He uses the Greek word koimaomai, meaning they slept. Because from the perspective of eternity, the death of a believer is not an end. It is merely a temporary pause before the ultimate awakening. Those two short verses in Matthew 27 were the very first public proof that Christ's victory on the cross was not just a personal victory, but a massive collective one. It was a glimpse, a cinematic trailer, proving that death would eventually be defeated by entire armies. If this video helped you look at the Bible and history through a window you've never looked through before, you can gently leave that like right now. It is not a favor, it is the tool that will allow this video to reach more people. See you in the next mystery.